Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Modern Customer Podcast. I'm your host, Blake Morgan. My next guest is Brittany Hodak. She is the author of the incredible book, Creating Superfans. She is an award-winning entrepreneur, author, and speaker who has delivered keynotes across the globe to organizations like American Express and the United Nations. She's worked with some of the world's biggest brands and entertainers like Katy Perry, Walmart, Dolly Parton, and Disney. She's also a new friend I really enjoy talking to. I know you're going to love hearing from her. Please enjoy Brittany Hodak. Brittany, welcome to the Modern Customer Podcast. How is life in Tennessee today?
Thank you, Blake. Life is good. I have no complaints. It's finally not 100 degrees every day, so I'll take it.
So I'm so glad that I found you. Our mutual friend Shep Hyken told me all about you, and you're everything he said and more. I've really enjoyed actually consuming your content and being inspired by your new book and your videos. And I was reading your book, Creating Superfans, yesterday at the dermatologist and just getting so many ideas. And I know your story. I know you've been on Shark Tank and all this stuff, but give us the elevator pitch of who is Brittany Hodak.
Well, thank you for the kind words. Shep is one of my favorite humans, and I'm so glad that he has connected us. Um, I am somebody who never thought I would be writing and speaking about customer experience. This was not the plan. This was a total accident. I grew up wanting to work in the entertainment industry. That's all I wanted to do from the time I was 4 years old. And I started working at a radio station when I was 16. I worked at record labels and music magazines and entertainment companies. And then when I was 26, I launched an entertainment company and sort of by accident became obsessed with customer experience. So my first big client that I landed was Walmart. And within a year, we had partnered with Walmart to do these huge projects nationwide with artists like Justin Bieber and Taylor Swift and Katy Perry and the Beach Boys and all of these huge artists. And because we were working with all these big brands, we were working with like CPG companies that were also selling stuff inside of Walmart. So everybody, Johnson Johnson, Procter and Gamble, Pepsi, Coke, like you name it, we had different partners on every project aligned around these artists. And I realized that the same problems that the CPG brand managers were trying to solve were the problems that I had been trying to solve for all of these artists that I had been working with for my entire career, which is essentially how do we get someone to like us? How do we get someone to choose us at the exclusion of all of our competitors? How do we get them to spend their time, their money, their energy consuming our things rather than other people's things? And so I went back to school. I got a master's degree in consumer behavior to really study the psychology behind not just the marketing, but what it is that an experience means to somebody and how to create the kinds that are going to get people not just to come back, but to bring their friends with them as well.
So, your career, you have been on fire, traveling all over the world, presenting your superfan, your supermodel framework, and you speak to so many different types of brands. Before we get into the main thesis of what you talk about in your book, what is the number one thing that people ask you about creating these advocates, these superfans?
Probably the question I get most often is how could I ever turn anybody into a super fan of what I do? What I do is
Mhm.
so commoditized, or what I do is so boring, or what I do is so mundane. And when I really start to ask questions to get into it with them, people realize, of course, I can create super fans. And no customer wants to feel like just another number. Nobody wants to feel like they're just giving their money to somebody who doesn't care about them. And the thing about creating super fans is it very often has less to do about the actual product or service that you're selling and more about the experience that you're wrapping it up all in. And so because of that, some of my favorite compliments have been from people who said, I felt like you wrote this book just for me, just for my industry. And these are all true examples. Some of those industries include the funeral services industry, the industrial concrete polishing industry, all types of food services, a company that does hemming, like for
Mhm.
all kinds of garments and curtains, like they do a lot of internal or like household hemming. And so that was like, has been my favorite part, and also my favorite thing to debunk. If people thought like, oh yeah, if you're in the entertainment industry or you have a big, cool, sexy job, yeah, you can turn your customers into super fans. But when people really read the book and they see me speak and they realize that it doesn't matter if you're selling software or, if you're on stage every night, you can absolutely make your customers want to come back and only work with you.
What I liked about your book is it's really the story of customer experience, but it's also very much the story of Brittany. It's a story of your life. It's when your husband created the login and password, Time Warner sucks, and you're fixing your own customer service. It's the story of Brittany being 4 years old and realizing she's a speaker. And I think that's what's so fun about this job that we do is like it's really your story. It's the passion you bring to it. And it's also just like the experiences you've had, like when you went to Costco and they wouldn't do the tour and you said, I'm never going to shop at Costco again. Where does inspiration come from for you for your work?
Well, one of the things that I say in the book is super fans are created at the intersection of your story in every customer story, because I think the biggest sort of villain, like if I were going to cast a super villain in the world of customer experience, it's apathy. It's people who
Mhm.
just don't care enough to care one way or the other. Like they don't understand how you're different from your competitors, nor do they want to invest the time, effort, energy to understand why. But when you can connect your story with other people's stories, they get it all of a sudden. They understand it. And that's why I like to share so many personal stories. And also because I think sometimes we forget to sell the way we buy or serve the way we want to be served. And all
Mhm.
of us are customers. All of us are constantly consuming things. And yet, like I tell the story in the book about the first time I saw my first grade teacher outside of school and how much it freaked me out because it had never entered my little 7-year-old head that she existed outside of that classroom. And so it
Yeah.
freaked me out when I saw her at the grocery store. And I think a lot of people remember seeing their teacher or seeing somebody they knew from like one very specific place in their life somewhere else. And I think a lot of people make that same mistake as adults. We think of our customers only in terms of who they are to us. We forget that there are real people with real needs, real families, real, struggles that they're encountering. And so part of the reason that I like to share personal stories and where part of my part of my inspiration comes from is just showcasing that we all know what we need to be doing because we know what we want as customers. And when you can lean into that, when you can be the acting chief of experience for your company because you're thinking about how would I want to be served if I were on the other side of this transaction, you automatically do a lot better.
Yeah, and I think energy, you and I have talked a lot offline about being moms, about being customer experience speakers, and this idea of caring, like you said, caring it is harder, and you have to care about everything, and that's how you make things great. And we care about everything, business, kids. What? How do you think that companies can create this culture of caring, this customer centric culture, and then scale that?
Well, one of the reasons that I love your book is because I feel like we are in complete alignment in the way that we answer this question, which is if you want your team to care about your employees, or excuse me, if you want your team to care about your customer, you have to have your executive team care so much about your employees because an apathetic employee is never going to create an engaged customer. So every single person at your organization from top down has to care about their direct reports, has to care about their colleagues, has to care about their supervisors. Like you have to have that not just, recognition of, yeah, I care about you when you get the job done, but true appreciation. I appreciate you for who you are. And our team is better because you're a part of it. Because if you don't have that culture inside the company, you're never going to reap the rewards externally, because your customers can feel it. Like we all know when we go somewhere and the employees don't want to be there, and it makes us not want to be there either. So I think that's the number one thing is you have to create that culture inside of the company to where your employees are proud. I was having lunch with a friend like a month ago and she said she was talking about, she had changed jobs, and I was so shocked because she had worked at this place and she loved it, and they had made some changes internally and even a few that were showing externally, and she said it's so hard to get up and go to work every day at a place you're not proud of. And after a couple of
Ooh,
weeks, I
yeah.
just couldn't do it anymore. Like I started telling people, oh, I'm a writer, instead of saying I'm a writer at the name of the place that she worked, because she was not proud of her company anymore. And so you have to start internally with your team, because if they're not proud, your customers are never going to, care more about you than they care about your competitors.
I love that, Brittany. And I always talk about how work can be a beautiful thing. It can give meaning and purpose to people's lives
Mhm.
and be a real sense of happiness and self satisfaction. But it's easy for companies to forget that employees, they need to be engaged, they need to be coached, they need to be given that feeling of purpose and meaning. Let's switch gears and get a little technical and look at your, I love this supermodel framework. Let's talk about the supermodel. What is the supermodel framework?
So the supermodel framework is the mnemonic device that I came up with to help illustrate all of the things that you need to do to create remarkable experiences, to make people choose you instead of your competitors. And the reason it's the word super, other than the obvious, like if you want to, be super, or if you want to create super fans, you've got to be super. It's so that it's simple to remember. So the framework, and I'll go through it quickly, and then we can kind of jump around or talk about any that you want to. But I think a huge mistake, and I know you agree with this, is that people think customer experience is a department, and it's not. It's a philosophy that every single person across the organization has to embrace. Everybody is part of the experience department. So these are designed to be very cross functional, cross departmental. But S is start with your story. If you don't understand why you deserve super fans, you are never going to have them. If you don't know why you're better than your competitors, nobody else ever is. So that's the S, is start with your story. You understand your customer story. That's about the empathy and the active listening and all of the things that we need to do to truly position ourselves to be able to create transformation for our prospects and customers. P is personalize. That's about all of the high tech and the high touch things that we do to create the high impact and make every customer feel like the most important one. E stands for exceed expectations, and honestly, this is the one that's, like, really customer experience. Like, I'm a customer experience speaker, and I believe all of these things are very much interconnected, but what most people think about as customer experience is my E, which stands for it's exceed expectations. That's where I talk about the idea of intentional experience design and journey mapping and how we're gonna measure things. And then finally, R stands for repeat, and it kind of has a double purpose. It's a repeat because you have to do the first four things over and over and over again. We know customer experience never ends. You're never like, oh, we got it, everything's perfect. It's a day in, day out obsession with how do we be better than we were a month ago. And then finally, also, it's the repeat is because that is the step in the process where I talk about the systems and the processes and the automations that you have to build to make the excellent experience the rule, not the exception, so that people know that they can depend on you to create a consistently amazing, or at least better than average experience.
Brittany, it reminds me of in your book, you talk about being a little kid and being obsessed with ads
Yeah.
and reading the back of the shampoo bottle about like wash, rinse, repeat. And you just like couldn't let that go. And like that's something that I always talk about. Like customer experience is like the soap bottle you were obsessed with when you were 5. It's wash, rinse, repeat. Like you're never done. I mean, is that a hard pill to swallow for your customers and prospects? Like, are they just like, I'm tired. I don't want to do this anymore?
I think sometimes they are, and my feedback is always, who's not tired? Your competitors that are
Right.
stealing your customers right now. And I mean, we've both been married for a long time. Don't you still want to be told by your husband that you love him like all the time? And if you're not, do you start to question in your head, even
I
if
mean,
you
I
know
force
it's not
him.
true?
I mean, he's getting forced. I'm like, "Tell me that I'm attractive, please, and tell me you love me." That
Right,
he's,
all the things,
he
because immediately in your head, you're like, "Even though I know you love me, you haven't told me you love me. Why not? What's wrong? What?" And you start to, like, think about all the things. And so that's it, right? Like, your customers want to know that they matter to you. They wanna know that you care about them. And so, yeah, it is important, and it's so funny you mentioned the packaging. I an hour ago took a picture of the back of a bottle of iced tea. Like, I'm constantly looking at what brands are saying, the positioning that they're creating for themselves, the stories that they're telling on their packaging. And this is a brand of iced tea called Milo's. And they said, I'm paraphrasing, but we make it like you do so that you don't have to. And I'm like, what a great value proposition. Like, yes, you could make your own iced tea, but we are going to save you the time, energy, and effort by doing it the way that you would do it so that you don't have to do it.
I love that. That is like literally the essence of customer experience. It's like we care as much as like a grandma in a bakery, like baking you a homemade muffin or something. It's like that extra, like we made this with love. Like we really care. And
Yeah.
I think there's been so many years of customers don't feel like businesses care. And right now, what's happening, the research shows that with inflation, companies have raised prices, but haven't necessarily added more value. So, do you have any message to brands regarding what's happening right now with the economy and its uncertainty, and we're in an election year? Like, how can they still win customers' hearts and minds, even though everything is kind of chaotic right now?
Well, one way is knowing that your competition is not just your literal direct competition. It's everywhere, right? It's you're being compared to the best of the best in every single vertical. So you have to step up your game. You have to make sure everybody on your team understands that they are the front lines, they are the acting chiefs of experience. They need to step up their game. I think one place where we're starting to see a lot of frustration and a lot of friction from customers is the tipping as like out of control, right? Like, I've written about this. I think you've written about this. The idea of like, I'm going to just, spin the iPad around and ask for a 20 or 25% tip when it was something
They
that
did nothing. Yeah.
traditionally would never, merit a tip before, is creating a lot of friction with customers. It's creating a lot of dissatisfaction. And I think all of the smart business owners are looking at ways to not just get more money or add more tips, but saying, what can we do to make this experience feel better? How can we make this more remarkable? And I promise you that the businesses that aren't thinking about it right now are going to suffer, because they may be the last ones to realize that a lot of those people that were coming and shopping with them are now shopping other places. So, which is another reason you need to obviously always be closely monitoring whether or not your customers are coming back, how often they're coming back, because a lot of times by the time you realize that you've lost them, and you've lost them over something that maybe you thought was inconsequential, it's too late, because they've already found
Mhm.
another solution, because it was easier for them to go find a better solution than it was to put in the effort to say, let me talk to you about this problem and see if you can fix it.
Yeah, it's like in the book where you talk about going to Costco and you just wanted to get a sneak peek. Like you wanted to go in and see what's in there, and they wouldn't let you. And after you waited 30 minutes, and it was just like, why they've literally taken time away from me I can't get back. And Costco people love to talk about, but like even the best in class like still have work to do. Let's talk about metrics, Brittany. Measuring super fans and advocacy. Sure, people always ask you about metrics. What's your favorite customer experience metric and why?
So, depending on the organization, I would either say earned growth rate, which I know
Mhm.
that you're a friend of Fred, and I think he's probably been on the show multiple times. So, EGR is a great one. But for a lot of people that aren't tracking CX at all right now, EGR is too complicated. The reason I
Yeah.
love earned growth is because it is tied to a financial statement, it is tied to revenue. You can clearly see it. But one of my favorite methods is just asking people to think of your customers as existing in different buckets and figure out how many of those customers you're paying for versus how many you're earning. So it's sort of like earned growth without having to figure out NRR and EGR. You just look at like, where are my customers coming from? And am I spending a lot of money for the ones that I'm maybe not going to see the customer lifetime value on, versus the referrals and the repeat customers, where it's virtually no customer acquisition costs and a much higher lifetime value. So I would say if you're not tracking EGR and you're a little bit overwhelmed by it when you look under the hood. Just ask yourself, like, what buckets are my revenue coming from right now? What is the lifetime value of the customer? What are the acquisition costs that I'm paying across those different buckets? And that will set you on the path towards having the CX maturity to use EGR as a true metric in the future.
Yeah, I think metrics are one of the most challenging pieces of customer experience because if you don't show that your customer programs, your investments are bringing a return, showing money made or money saved, like you're not going to get more money for your programs. What is one thing that you wish everyone knew about building advocates for the business?
That it's everyone's job.
Mhm.
And I know we've talked about this a little bit, but I invite everybody listening to think back of the last experience that you talked about, whether it was a product or a service, something that you were buying that you talked about the experience, and think about what it is that you shared. I would bet a lot of money that there was a human in that interaction, that you were talking about
Mhm.
how great the experience was, how it felt, how fast it was, how impressed you were because of someone. And I know a lot of times people like to think that their brand is their logo, their website, the splashy ads that they're running. But at the end of the day, your brand is your team and the
Mhm.
way that your customers experience that team and then go tell their friends about the experiences they had. So that I think is the biggest misperception, is that like one department or a handful of people are the ones in charge of creating advocates, because in reality, it's the people out there on the front lines in the call
I'm
centers
curious.
and interacting with customers everywhere they are.
So you are on the road a lot. You're a busy speaker. Do you ever go to Newark Airport and like order food from those iPads and there's no people anywhere at the airport?
Yep.
And and do you think this is a good move or is this like creepy?
I am not a fan. I mean, here are like the two rules that I always ask people to think about when they are introducing technology or automation anyway. Number one, does this make the experience better for my customers?
Yeah.
And if the answer is yes, great, then you're done. If the answer is no, then you move on to the second question, which is, by adding this automation or technology, am I freeing up my team's time to positively impact my customer experience with the time that they have saved, right? Like, because the order has been taken on an iPad, now they are able to, surprise and delight the customer in some way, do something else, right? And too oftentimes, that's not what companies are thinking, right? They're thinking like, oh, I have fewer people to pay if I just have an iPad and the customers can figure it out. And I think the reason that you see a lot of that in places like airports is because it is so transactional. Newark knows that only what, maybe 20% of the people that are coming in are people that are going to be back with any amount of regularity. The rest are very transient by nature of being in an
Mhm.
airport. So they're like, oh, it doesn't matter. Like, who cares about that person? But I think it's short sighted. I think it is something that we will start to see go the other way. Like you're already seeing with some of the grocery store chains, getting rid of self checkout or relying less on self checkout to
Yeah.
bring the cashiers back because customers want it. So I think it's going to be very interesting. And I want to talk about you. You just had a video where you were talking about the crappy Wi-Fi experience in hotels, where like hotels now try to say like, oh, because you're a premium member, you don't have to pay for the Wi-Fi, which is really saying to every one of your customers, I don't care enough about you to like have you be able to check your email or stream your shows, which I love. And it is a very CX centric mindset to say, when you have a loyalty tier, the message that you're sending to everybody else is often, I don't care about you, or I don't care as much about you. Or if you really want me to care about you, then you have to pay me more money than you've already paid me to care about you. And I think a lot of people aren't thinking about it that way. And they're making a few extra dollars now, but costing themselves several multiples of that long term.
Yeah, the Wi-Fi example that I talked about is that like when you say, "Oh, like here's the premium Wi-Fi you get because you're a XYZ member." Then what about like the neighboring room where there's little kids and they're trying to stream their cartoons? Like, I'm wondering, do they have the crappy Wi-Fi because they couldn't afford to upgrade? Like that's what I'm thinking about. So you have to also anticipate where your customer's brain is going to go and not and really think through, like, is this an experience that I would want to have as a customer? Like, how would I feel going through this experience?
Absolutely.
Brittany, you and I seem to have a lot of fun, and we actually prefer having fun to working lately because you and I have so much to talk about outside of work. But let's let our audience get to know you, just as I've enjoyed getting to know you recently. Are you ready for some rapid fire?
I am. Let's do it.
Okay, Brittany, what's the most important part of your morning routine?
The most important part of my morning routine is after my kiddos are out the door on the way to school, and I open my computer, and before I do any work at all, I look at the day ahead. Because even though I look at it the night before, as a mom, by the next morning, your brain is already mush and you've forgotten because you've been asked to recall, whether or not it's like show and tell day or bring a book day, the names of
Mhm.
74 Pokemon cards, like where the other
Right.
green shoe is. So taking that like 10 minutes to say, okay, I'm going to be very intentional about what my calendar looks like today and what I need to do to show up and bring my best to every one of these meetings on my calendar is probably the most important part of my morning.
Okay, what show are you currently streaming?
So I'm watching, I think it's called Dream Academy. It's a show on
Mhm.
Netflix about Hybe and Geffen making like a global K-pop group. And it's really
Mhm.
fascinating. So everybody check it. I think it's
Okay.
called Dream Academy, but they're making a band called Cat's Eye and it's on Netflix.
What is your idea of perfect happiness?
Having my entire family, so my husband and my two little boys, together somewhere that we get to just have fun for the day and nobody has to worry about anything other than having fun. So whether that's a zoo or a carnival or a beach or a baseball game, just hanging out.
What is one mental health strategy for managing hard days?
Is a bubble bath a mental health strategy?
Definitely.
What if it comes with
Yeah.
wine? If it's bubble bath and wine, can we count that as a strategy?
Oh my God, great. What's your favorite type of vacation?
My favorite type of vacation is a beach vacation to Hawaii. My kids are still really little, like yours, so we're not doing so many beaches. So, I would say tie between beaches and theme parks, but definitely I prefer beaches.
Okay. And if you could have lunch with anyone dead or alive, who would it be?
My dad. My dad passed away a while ago, so if I could have lunch with anybody, it would be my dad.
Okay. If you had to describe your outlook in one quick motto, what would it be?
Somebody said to me once, I'm sure this is a famous quote, and I have no idea who said it, but it's really served me in my career. Don't accept no from anyone who lacks the authority to say yes. So, like, don't let a no
hmm
from somebody stop you if that's not the ultimate yes you were seeking anyway.
I love that. I love that so much. Okay. And if people want to hire you or buy your book, where can they do that?
You can find me at brittanyhodak.com. The book Creating Superfans is available everywhere books are sold in hardcover and an audiobook that I narrate. But you can find all of the information about me at brittanyhodak.com.
Well, everybody, I really recommend Brittany for your next event. She's an incredible speaker, as you've just seen on this interview. Brittany, we have to have coffee in person soon. Thank you for doing this, and hopefully, you'll come back and do this again.
I will come back anytime. Like, as you know, I love hanging out with you. We could probably just record all of our phone calls and make a really fun
Yeah,
podcast. Maybe we'll have to take that offline. It'll be
I
Blake and
know.
Brittany talk about things that have nothing to do with CX.
I know. We could call it Airbnb, but it'd be more than air.
Yes, I
That's
100%.
right, Blake and Brittany.
Yes.
All right, everybody, you've been watching the Modern Customer Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel or follow me on social media, including Instagram, LinkedIn, X, and more.